Stacy Gales, her mother and father, were abusive and did drugs, drank a lot, did not pay much attention to the children in the home. Many times she and her siblings had to fight for food and kind of really take care of themselves from a very early age. They were neglected. And basically, her mother was incapable of really doing anything except drinking a case of beer each day and lying on the couch while the children were left to fend for themselves. And that's sad. A child to a house fire and then another one to SIDS later on. This probably it probably contributed to the hostile environment that Stacy had to grow up in. Her mother drinking a case of beer a day and lying on the couch, letting the children fend for themselves, is really indicative of somebody who has a lot of guilt and remorse, and it's too bad. And maybe her mother would have been a great mother if that would not have happened. Or maybe her mother or her stepfather or her father had started the fires or had smothered the child. Who knows? But something was not right in that household. But it didn't bother Stacy. She looked for a bright future for herself. She looked onward and upward, for she always did very well in school, getting almost straight A's, and even graduated high school at 16, which is very young. She always wanted to be a nurse. However, she could not afford the tuition, so she took odd jobs and, just kind of whatever she could to pay the bills. Now, when she was 17 in 2001, she was working at a hotel at the front desk where she met Drew Peterson. Drew Peterson was 47 years old when she was 17. That is crazy. He was on his third marriage to a woman named Kathleen when he met Stacy Gale. And that didn't seem to bother either of them because Drew had made up such horrific lies about Kathleen, saying that she was on cocaine and drank and did not treat their children well. At this point, he had 2 sons. And really, since Stacy did not grow up with a father figure, she found that in Drew. And I think that is probably one reason why she did marry him, because she thought that she could be taken care of, that she would have a secure home, and the lies he told were ignored by Stacy because he was a DEA agent and worked as a police officer. So why would he lie? But even police officers lie and kill their wives. So they actually started dating in 2001. And they would go rollerblading, walking, and actually slept together in the basement of his soon-to-be ex-wife's house, Kathleen. But they eventually, Drew and Kathleen, did finally divorce in 2003. And 8 days later, only eight days later, is when Drew and Stacy got married. So they had 2 children. The first child was a son, before, Kathleen and Drew, even though they were divorced, were about to settle their financial issues that they had been disputing over for the last year since the divorce. And unfortunately, in March, when there was supposed to be more than just Stacy and Drew in the courtroom, there wasn't. Kathleen did not show up for that court date. Her brother went over to Kathleen's house, where he opened the door and found her face down in the bathtub, passed away. Everybody suspected Drew was a culprit. However, the coroner's report said that the official finding was it was accidental drowning. She had fallen and hit her head and drowned. However, when she was found, there was no water in the bathtub, and that I find to be very strange. But Stacy gave him a full alibi, and he didn't have to worry about it because Stacy swore an oath that he was with her the entire time that he could have possibly been killing Kathleen. So the coroner's report showed, I guess, it was an accident, and they went on with their lives for a number of years until Stacy's sister, Tina, died of cancer when Stacy was only 23. And I think this really affected Stacy because she started to take the children to Bible study. She started dressing differently. She had taken on a job as an Avon salesperson. She was really, finding herself. She was also realizing that this relationship with Drew was not healthy. It was not what she wanted, and decided she wanted a divorce. On October 27th, she was with her sister, Cassandra, sitting in her bed at Cassandra's house, telling Cassandra that if anything happened to her, it was Drew that did it. That if she ended up dying or that she disappeared, it was Drew. And definitely have Drew investigated. Cassandra begged Stacy not to leave that night. She begged her to stay with her right where she was. But the strange thing is that Drew kept coming in every 5 minutes and interrupting their conversation, saying that they had to go. They had to go. Cassandra said he was just adamant that she had to leave right then. And even though Cassandra tried to fight her sister, she left with Drew. That would be the last time Cassandra would ever see her sister ever again. As of October 28th, Cassandra would also be receiving a text from her sister, Stacy, saying that she did not feel like getting out of bed as of yet, because Stacy was supposed to go to Cassandra's house and help her paint, and she never showed up. And that was the last text that anybody ever got from her. Called Drew and said, "Where's my sister?" after Stacy had not shown up that day. And she found that to be very odd because Stacy was a very reliable, responsible human being. So Cassandra immediately wanted to know what happened to my sister. Drew said, "I don't know. She called me from the airport, said that she was getting on a flight with another man, she was going away to start a new life somewhere else. She did not want to be with me anymore. And her sister and Stacy's family did not believe a word of it. Not a word. Well, Drew is dancing around, flitting away, saying that she didn't want to be with me, whatever. No kind of worry in the world. Her family decided to file a missing persons report because they did not believe a word he said, and all these people are out looking for Stacy. Literally, search parties, they are looking everywhere, her family's looking everywhere, and Drew is at home going, she left me, no big deal, whatever, I'm not looking for her. And just being so arrogant and cocky. I think at this point Drew had gotten away with so much in his life and had that power of being a policeman and a DEA agent, and had really put so many people in jail that he figured, well, can't happen to me, I have too many connections. I believe that first coroner's report was somehow tampered with. I'm not saying the coroner was paid off, but somehow that report was not correct. And you'll see why in a little bit. So, here's the thing. Once October 28th came, 2007, came and went. People were out looking for, Drew seemed to be treating it like a joke. He was so flippant and arrogant, nobody could believe it. He claimed that she had asked him all the time for a divorce, and that it depended on her menstrual cycle as to if she asked him or not, or if she loved him or not. And people started to see this side of Drew that was not appealing and very unattractive for sure, and unpleasant, because Stacy had not only suffered emotional abuse, she had suffered physical abuse as well. Similar again to her mother, although she did not do drugs or alcohol. In fact, I think she went the opposite way because of her mother. She was a very good mother, and Drew knew that. Everyone's gonna believe him just because he said it, I guess is what bothers me the most about this. Drew just expected everybody to listen to him because he said it. But that's what had happened in the past. Kathleen, with the coroner's report, it was, I believe that he just felt so godlike that there wasn't really anybody he could do. Now his step-brother has a different story, Thomas Morphy. Thomas was a drug addict and alcoholic, and unfortunately, 2 days before, I asked him to pick him up and take him to the park where he needed to talk to him. Thomas said that Drew said, or asked him if he would, did he love him enough that he would kill for him? Thomas said, no, I couldn't live with myself. He said, okay then, could you live with yourself if you knew I had killed somebody? And he said, well, yeah, I think so. He said, okay, well, Stacy has been having an affair, and there's going to be a murder. So, good night, good night, good night, wherever you are. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. Thomas to a storage unit and asked him, a storage facility, and asked him to get a storage locker. And Thomas had said, if you're going to kill somebody and put a body in there, it's going to smell, and my name is going to be on it. And Drew responded, not by saying, no, there's not going to be a body. He responded by saying, it won't smell because it will be sealed in a container. So Drew said, okay, will you now get a storage locker for me? Thomas agreed and tried to get a storage locker, although he did not have his ID on him and could not, and did not get a storage locker. However, Drew wanted to stop by his house really quick. He stopped by the house as Drew jumped out of the car, ran into the house. He pulled out a blue barrel that he was trying to roll out the front door onto the steps, but it was so heavy that Drew could not handle it, and Thomas jumped out the car and helped Drew take this blue barrel and put it into his truck. Thomas did not say anything to Drew. He just assumed that it was the dead body of the person Stacy was having an affair with. This Thomas was saying, because that is when he had allegedly helped Drew with the barrel. So they had to assume that she was already dead, since the barrel was so heavy. But Thomas did not realize that Drew was going to kill Stacy. He actually, really thought that he was going to kill her lover. I guess that he could live with, but he couldn't live with the fact that he might kill Stacy. And he said, if you get this storage locker, he even promised him $2,000 to get this locker. I think that's why he went and tried to get it, but he ended up not being able to get it, luckily. Or unlucky, actually, because if he would have gotten the locker, how strange would this would have been? So he would have gotten the locker, because Thomas then went home after finding out that Stacy was missing, panicked about the entire last 2 days in the conversations and helping him with the barrel, that he tried to commit suicide. Luckily, his wife found him in time, took him to the hospital, and he survived. Now, after he recovered, Thomas went to the police and said all these things that happened, the correspondence between he and Drew in the last 2 or 3 days before the disappearance of Stacy. So the police, because of this, Thomas was also freaking out about something about how Drew must have killed Kathleen. That if Stacy's gone, Kathleen died, something wasn't right. And because of this, the police actually put Thomas in police protection for 6 months until the grand jury called on him as a witness. And he was given full immunity from anything, any convictions that might have been coming his way as an accessory to the crime. So here's the thing, is that without a body, there is no way they would even try. The prosecutor, for some reason, wouldn't try on the evidence they had, because they figured out, he'll just get off, we need a body. Drew, knowing this, was very arrogant about everything, even went on a dating show. I mean, absurd behavior. But because of what Thomas had told police, the judge did sign an order to have her body, his ex-wife Kathleen's body, exhumed, okay? And what they found in the next coroner's report is interesting because it completely contradicts what the first one said. Remember, the first one just said it was an accident, she hit her head and drowned. But remember, there was no water in the bathtub. So I find that odd. from somebody who just kept, grabbing her, clawing at her. And not only did she not hit her head on the bathtub, but she did not drown. There was no water in her lungs. And the hit on the head was not it did not actually split open the skull. She was hit really hard with a blunt object that pressed into her skull, didn't break it, but made her brain bleed. Basically being, one of the many reasons why she eventually succumbed to her injuries. So, unfortunately, though, I remember that Thomas was a drug addict and alcoholic. So Drew's attorney, Joe Brodsky, did not believe that Thomas would be a good or credible witness to the jury. But they didn't need his testimony after finding out about Kathleen, because not only was the coroner's report totally different, it listed her death as a homicide instead of an accident. So, Drew was said that because he was involved with this Stacy and had divorced Kathleen, and then the day of her court was actually found in the bathtub dead, that it was really Drew that killed her. And he was actually convicted of her murder and sentenced to 38 years. Bars, at least. He can't hurt anybody else. Or can he? So now, this guy he's really got a lot of guts, man, I'll tell you. He is actually convicted to 40 more years because in February 2015, he was charged of trying to organize a hit on the Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow. I mean, can you believe that? That this man in jail is so cocky and so arrogant that he thinks he can get away with organizing a hit on his state prosecutor. Is he out of his mind? Well, he's given another 40 years for soliciting some, kill for hire, basically. I don't understand why. I guess because Stacy had said, oh yeah, Drew was with me. He had an alibi. I guess they couldn't really give him life for Kathleen's murder, but they did give him 38 years. And then another 40 for trying to kill her. Or the state's attorney, sorry. So this guy is crazy. But still, to this day, I laugh when I read this. That he feels like it's not easy for him that his wife ran away with another man. And he still, to this day, says, she's where she wants to be, not home with me. And that when he's asked, what would you say to her? He says, I'd ask her to come home, please. And that's a bunch of crap. Anyway, her sister, Cassandra, has spent over $80,000 in 8 or 10 years of her life looking for Stacy's body. And she does actually get a sonar of this body, an outline. She's not sure if it's Stacy's, and convinces 2 diving groups to go out and try to find this picture, the sonar. And the bones they bring up are not even, they're so deteriorated they can't tell if they're human or not. So they don't ever find her body, and after 2 dives of extensive searching, they cannot find this body that they can see a sonar picture that she has, that her sister has, Cassandra has. And Cassandra's like, look, I've gone to the state begging them, the state police begging them, hey, this isn't, if it's not my sister, it's somebody else. You need to get this body out of this bay. It's kind of like in a river bay out, to a bigger body of water from a sanitary plant. So it's kind of in a weird place. It's really murky, muddy, thick water. And it's 20 feet down, this body is. And it's just too bad that she said two diving groups go down there and try to pull up this body. Yet, nope, they've come up nothing of the few, like a handful of bones that are so deteriorated they can't even tell if they're human. But what I find even stranger about this case is that the mother, Christy Gales, which is Stacy Peterson's mom, had a life of pain and suffering and addiction, and tragically lost 2 children. Now, Christy went down a downward spiral where Stacy hadn't. However, they both literally woke up one day and were never seen again. Stacy's mom, had walked out of the front door with a Bible in her hand and disappeared. And that's the last anybody had ever seen her or anything. And I find that to be so bizarre. Stacy's life would be like, even though she wasn't a drug addict, she was still then married a man who abused her, and she was controlled, and she didn't have the same catastrophic events that happened to her mother, but they both disappeared without trace, never to be found again. I thought it's just so bizarre. And Christy had contested, he wanted to divorce her, and Christy had contested it. And she kept missing the court dates because she couldn't stay off of drugs and alcohol. So the court granted him full custody of all the children. And that was not good for Christy. She was able to still see her children even though they moved from time to time. And eventually she met another man that she moved in with in 1998. And that's when she was carrying her Bible purse and was never seen or heard from again. So, Stacy had always, I guess, believed that, or the boyfriend being the killer. But they tried to make a case. So the family, the kids, tried to make a case with the local police, but failed to agree, and no investigation was undertaken. So I think she was probably labeled a drug addict, alcoholic, irresponsible. She was known to kind of just like disappear, even though she would come back. So it was hard for the police to really take the time and money and energy of their, force to really find her mother. So that was sad. But, to this day, her sister still feels like the state police aren't doing enough, because here's this picture, the sonar picture of this body that's 20 feet down in this murky, muddy water. Yes, but it's somebody's family member. It's somebody, whether it's her sister or somebody else, and they just kind of ignore her. They've sent 2 dive teams down, and oddly enough, I don't know, it's in some ways I feel, I don't know, just kind of a gut feeling, like I say, that one piece of evidence that just doesn't feel right. After the kind of, I feel, botched first autopsy of his first wife, or of his third wife, Kathleen, being murdered, and they said it was an accident, and then it just, I don't know. I feel like somebody somehow is protecting him, whether it's higher up or just family, who knows? So, I don't know. One thing for sure is that I think the majority of people believe that Stacy is murdered. I know her family does. I do. I think she was murdered.